stand-up community subscribers and listeners from around the globe. It's time to Stand Up with Pete Dominic, where we ask the important questions that impact you, your family, and your community. Such as, is my garbage bin large enough to hide in and surprise the sanitation workers? And where could I get a pair of those sexy new stiletto Crocs? And now, the podcast host whose chiseled hairless body sends naked mole rats into a frenzy of ovulation, Pete Dominic.
Yes! Yes, that is right. Thank you very much, Pete Co. I greatly appreciate that. You're too kind, sir. You're too kind. Hi, everybody. Welcome to episode 370 of Stand Up. Joining me today, it's been far too long since we touched base with the executive director of taxmarch.org, my friend Maura Quint, and I had a great conversation. Also, the great former Boston Globe columnist and writer and author Michael Cohen joins me to talk about his latest. And lots to discuss, of course, with Michael. As always, two great guests joining me on today's program, and lots of news to get to. Thank you to all of you who joined me last night in the Hangout. Almost 40 of you were there. It's a lot of fun. We had a great conversation about how we're dealing with coming out of the pandemic and returning to, quote, normal times, and how you're dealing, again, with the fear of missing out and so much more. Such a great community of people. I highly recommend that you sign up and join us. And sometimes I worry that some of us have been meeting almost every week throughout the pandemic, that other folks who are subscribers are like, you know what, I don't know these people. I don't want to. No, everybody's welcome. If you've never hung out with us, if you've not joined the community, please do now. Because it's such a great, inspiring group of people that always come together for each other. We always have a lot of laughs as well. Usually on Thursday nights, but this week it was Wednesday. Next week as well, Wednesday at 8 p.m. Looking forward to seeing you there. Go to the paid subscription link in the show notes and sign up now. Patreon.com/Pete Dominic. So tomorrow I'm off to what is being called Stang Bang, and everybody was making fun of me for that last night, which was hilarious because our high school mascot is the Mustangs, and 17 of us are getting together for 3 days over the weekend, renting a house in the Poconos. Cannot wait. Very excited for that, and hopefully I come back alive because there's going to be some debauchery that I can guarantee. So, lots to get to in the news. That's what I always do at the beginning of the program, Monday through Thursday. On Fridays, I usually just have the guest interviews, and Christian Finnegan will be joining me. I know that, and more. Also, Jason Johnson is going to be back on the show. He was not allowed to do other podcasts when he started his Slate.com podcast, but now he is. I don't know what happened, but either way, he's going to be back on as well. So, very excited about that news. But now it's time to get to the news. It's time for the last 24. All right, first of all, I do want to mention the government watchdog group that apparently came out with a report that concluded that police did not clear Lafayette Park so the former president, Donald Trump, could hold a Bible photo op. We all know that's not true. We all saw exactly what happened because we have eyes. Dan Lamoth tweets, well, it's quite the coincidence. Lots of people writing on this were careful, noting the timing without drawing conclusions. This changes nothing about how violently Lafayette Square was cleared without serious warning. And finally, Trump still opted to hold the photo op right after. So that's one reaction. Tom Ricks writes on Twitter, who are you going to believe, an official report or your eyes? One more tweet. Do you know why this is news? Because it's a lie. I believe my own eyes. Police did not clear D.C.'s Lafayette Park of protesters so Trump could hold a photo op. Come on now. All right, so that's pretty much my reaction to it. I didn't read the report, though. To be fair, I haven't seen it, but I did see a lot of that, and I don't know if you're paying attention to that story. So that's one thing I want to mention up here at the top. Got a lot of things I want to play for you here in the last 24 as well. Let's start with Dr. Anthony Fauci really letting loose yesterday, a little kind of, I think, out of characteristic for him, but he seems to have had enough of a lot of the bizarre accusations around him and about him himself. And so he went on MSNBC with Chuck Todd, and Chuck Todd played a clip of Senator from Tennessee, a United States Senator named Marsha Blackburn, was saying some crazy things, and then you can hear Fauci respond to that in this clip.
Here are some facts that I want you to know. First of all, yes, Dr. Fauci was emailing with Mark Zuckerberg from Facebook, trying to create that narrative, cherry-picking information so that you would only know what they wanted to know, you to know, and there would be a narrative that would fit with this cherry-picked information.
I don't even know where to begin, but it's a sitting United States senator. It's the most, what I would call the most extreme version of what I've heard. You've got Kevin McCarthy doing his own version of this, Marco Rubio. You're aware of the critiques. You've been debunking this. How do you debunk something like that? She's got it in her own head. Again, a United States senator that represents the state of Tennessee. What do you say to that?
You know, Chuck, I don't have a clue of what she just said. I don't have a clue of what she's talking about.
Neither did we.
I mean, welcome to the club. I have no idea what she's talking about. And I'm sorry, I don't want to be pejorative against a United States senator, but I have no idea what she's talking about. And, you know, Chuck, if you go through each and every one of the points, which are so ridiculous as you know, just painfully ridiculous. But nonetheless, if you go through each and every one of them, you can explain and debunk it immediately. I mean, every single one. He should be fired because he, in the beginning, changed his mind about masks. Well, okay, so let's go back early on with the masks, and let's take a look at that. At the time that we were saying we shouldn't be wearing a mask, there were three factors that were going on. A, there was thought to be a shortage of masks. B, there was no evidence that masks worked outside of the context of a hospital. I wear a mask when I'm seeing patients with respiratory disease that could be transmissible, like tuberculosis, a well-fitted N95. Thirdly, we were not aware of the extent of asymptomatic spread. So we said you don't really need to wear a mask. It wasn't only me. I'm picked out at the villain. It was the Surgeon General of the United States, and the entire CDC was saying the same thing. So as we went from January, February, March, April, it became clear that those three things, A, there was no shortage, and you could wear a cloth mask. B, the data showed that, in fact, outside of the hospital setting, masks do work. And third, to our painful awareness, it became clear that 50% or more of the transmissions were with people who had no symptoms. So that's when we said, we've got to get people to wear masks. That's what's called, Chuck, the scientific process. You make a recommendation, an opinion, and a guideline based on what you know at a given time. As a scientist, as a health official, when those data change, when you get more information, it's essential that you change your position because you've got to be guided by the science and the current data. That issue with masks is people want to fire me or put me in jail for what I've done, namely follow the science. I could go the next half an hour going through each and every point that they make. It's preposterous, Chuck. Totally preposterous.
Well, first of all, who pronounces preposterous with that hard E? Preposterous. Okay. And second of all, I mean, is it, though? Is that the question that Chuck Todd should have been asking? I don't think those are the right questions. I think the conversation around Dr. Fauci and around COVID-19's origin has to do with the controversial idea of gain-of-function research. Controversial because it's science that will hopefully, that is done to help prevent horrible diseases from spreading or to be able to stop them and understand how they spread. But you're also creating those diseases in a lab that can spread to humans. And so therein lies the controversy around it. And it's only allowed to happen in certain very secure labs. And the United States of America invests in this type of research, as does other countries. And so there's some controversy about that. And there's some controversy about the United States investment and what we knew. And that's fine. And that's important. I think those are fun questions, but I didn't hear him asking those. Maybe I missed it. But those are the more, I think, important accusations and questions that need to be asked to Dr. Fauci and other scientists who have differing opinions on the ethics of gain-of-function research. So that's, I think, where the conversation should be. I'll be having that conversation with scientists and bioethicists like Dr. Arthur Kaplan on this program, and we will learn together as we do about everything right here on Stand Up each and every day. All right, what else do I have for you in my goodie bag of audio? Oh, this craziness, this doctor who is telling lawmakers that vaccines magnetize people. This has been a rumor that's been going around for a long time, and from videos to YouTube to TikTok, people are sticking spoons on their body. I mean, this is just it's a wild thing because everybody, I showed this video last night to folks at our hangout, and we were all just gobsmacked by it. But, I mean, my big point was things stick to your body all the time. Last night, Karen Madison goes, her skin's greasy, which was hilarious. Yeah, things stick to your body all the time. Every day, you peel pieces of paper and other things off your body. It's bizarre. It was the most bizarre video to watch. This anti-vax nurse in Ohio trying to prove that vaccines cause magnetism theory in a state legislative committee. And, well, the demonstration just didn't go as planned. Here's the audio, but what you need to know if you haven't seen is the things she's trying to stick to her body fall off. Well, she puts a key on her chest, and it sticks there, but it's because it's her chest. It's slanted. Then she puts it on her neck, and it falls right off. And then she gets a barrette. And here let's listen to it together.
Yes, vaccines do harm people. By the way, so I just found out something when I was on lunch, and I wanted to show it to you. We were talking about Dr. Tenpenny's testimony about magnetic vaccine crystals. So this is what I found out. So I have a key and a bobby pin here.
All right.
Explain to me why the key sticks to me.
Because it's on your chest.
It sticks to my neck, too.
No, it doesn't. What? It's not sticking. Nope.
I got this.
Nope.
Yeah,
nope.
So if somebody can explain this, that would be great.
You just put the key down and picked up the barrette because the key didn't stick. And the barrette's followed 4 times.
Any questions?
And then it stuck for less than a second. It stuck there. And then she said, any questions? Like she had just unveiled a magic trick that was blowing everybody's mind. And it's so cringe because it fails. What she's trying to prove fails. And then she asks with all the confidence of an expert, any questions? Yeah. Are you embarrassed? You fucking idiot. Are you embarrassed? 2 million views, at least on what I'm seeing on Twitter right now, of this crazy person. But that's where we're at least some of us in America. Too many of us. We're the greatest country on earth because of regular folks like her. Woo! All right. Well, we got some other crazy people I got to share with you. This is a congresswoman from Colorado named Lauren Boebert, and she tried and failed to get the White House budget director, Shalonda Young, to admit that Biden had ceded the southern border to the drug cartels, but Shalonda Young refused to accept the premise, and it throws off Boebert's whole game. And this is crazy clip number 2.
I think the one question I have for you, Director, and most Americans have for this president and this administration is just how long will you be ceding the southern border to the cartels?
I'd like to remind everyone who cares about where the border funding came from last administration. We are returning the billions of dollars that were taken from our men and women and troops in uniform for the southern border work. So this administration is returning Department of Defense money that bipartisan members decried as taking
reclaiming
away
my
from critical
time.
projects.
Excuse me, reclaiming my time. We're not talking about the funding that was taken away right now, and we are currently paying contractors to not build. I asked you, how long will you be ceding the southern border to the cartels? That is my question to you, Director.
Well, given the bipartisan concern from the stealing from DOD, I thought it was important to highlight that and also highlight that we are moving away from an unsustainable border wall that has not worked to technology, as you pointed out. To
reclaiming my time. I need you to answer the question that I'm asking you. This is my time. How long will you be ceding our southern border to the cartels?
That's not a question with an assumption in which I'm going to assume. So we can certainly talk about the reassessment.
Our time is up. Thank you very much, Director. Our time has expired. Thank you, Director.
Gentlewoman's time has expired. Now, Rick.
Oh, and the crazy continues from yesterday when Congresswoman Louis Gohmert, in remarks during a House Natural Resources hearing, asked the Forest Service officials, if they could change the orbit of the Earth and the Moon. And you don't believe me. You think I'm being sarcastic or hyperbolic. Listen from a House Natural Resources hearing yesterday.
And I understand from what's been testified to, the Forest Service and the BLM, you want very much to work on the issue of climate change. I was informed by the immediate past director of NASA that they have found that the moon's orbit is changing slightly, and so is the Earth's orbit around the sun. We know there's been significant solar flare activity. And so is there anything that the National Forest Service or BLM can do to change the course of the moon's orbit or the Earth's orbit around the sun? Obviously, that would have profound effects on our climate.
Holy shit. Holy shit.
I would have to follow up with you on that one, Mr. Gohmert.
Yeah. Well, if you figure out a way that you in the Forest Service can make that change, I'd like to know. Also, just to...
Bureau of Land Management is BLM, is Bureau of Land Management, by the way, and in case that was confusing. But he just asked if this agency, this federal agency, can change the orbit. I don't... So there you go. It's hard. It's scary because that's what we're dealing with. People who are sticking keys to themselves and thinking that it's because of the vaccine, and not that they haven't showered and it's a piece of metal. People like Congresswoman Lauren Boebert. I mean, these are actual people that are educated as well. Lauren Boebert, who's a congresswoman from Colorado, trying to say that we've ceded the southern border. She's an insane person, QAnon congresswoman. And then, of course, finally, the king of crazy, Louis Gohmert, asking if the federal government is somehow affecting the orbit of the moon and the Earth. I don't even know what he said. It's just absolute batshit craziness. And I wanted to make sure that you heard all of it. So there you go. You're welcome. You are welcome that I played those 3 crazy clips from yesterday for you here on today's episode of Stand Up. All right, now I've got to get to Senator Patrick Leahy, who is Senator of Vermont. He's the chairman of the Judiciary Committee. He is 722 years old. Yeah, Gandalf is like his grandchild. He's so old and has all kinds of health issues, and I worry about him a lot. He's a smart guy and an affable guy, but there's no way that he should be talking in public. I'm sorry. If that's offensive, I'm sorry. Because you could have some young, vibrant woman or man representing the Senate, being the chairman from Vermont, being the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, asking better, more clear-cut questions to the Attorney General who needs to be answering these questions. But instead, we got Senator Patrick Leahy. I'm sorry again for being so critical, but this is tough. What do you think?
Now, Attorney General, in the past few weeks, your department has endorsed some highly controversial positions taken by the former president's Justice Department. Many have expressed concerns about that. For example, the Trump DOJ removed from the state court to federal court a defamation charge involving an assault allegation against Donald Trump by a woman. The release of the OLC memo on obstruction of justice conclusions and so on. How is this coming about? Are these criticisms valid, or what do you say about them?
I mean, this is just absolute terrible question. Are these criticisms valid? What do you say about them? Had he even prepared? I mean, the guy's barely hanging on. He shouldn't be asking questions to the Attorney General. I'm sorry. But anyway, here is Merrick Garland's answer under such a tough grilling from Grandpa Leahy.
Senator, I'm grateful for you asking me the question, and I know about the criticisms. Look, the job of the Justice Department in making decisions of law is not to back any administration, previous or present. Our job is to represent the American people. And our job in doing so is to ensure adherence to the rule of law, which is the fundamental requirement of a democracy or a republic or a representative democracy. And the essence of the rule of law is what I said when I accepted the nomination for Attorney General. It is that like cases be treated alike, that there not be one rule for Democrats and another for Republicans, that there not be one rule for friends and another for foes. Now, it is not always easy to apply that rule. Sometimes it means that we have to make a decision about the law that we would never have made and that we strongly disagree with as a matter of policy. But in every case, the job of the Justice Department is to make the best judgment it can as to what the law requires. Now, matters of policy, of course, are completely different, and that explains why we have reversed the policies of the previous administration many times over the last 3 months, and why we have initiated our own policies that are distinctly different from those of the previous administration. But this is an important issue, the distinction between law and policy, and it's at the center of ensuring adherence to the rule of law, for which the Justice Department stands.
All right. Well, there you go. That's the Attorney General under tough questioning from Senator Patrick Leahy. I gave you a lot of perspectives on yesterday's episode of this podcast on this issue, and I want to give you one more here. This is, I like this. I saw this today on Twitter. This is a law professor at Western New England University School of Law. She's the author of a book called Big Dirty Money, and her analysis, criticism got a lot of pickup yesterday, and it was Jennifer Taub. I'll reach out to her to get her on the show, at Jen Taub. But she writes, to say that I'm deeply disappointed in Merrick Garland deciding to take Trump's case against E. Jean Carroll is an understatement. It was not legally necessary or ethically correct. Moreover, it reflects this country's long history of racism and misogyny. In America, we have a legacy of lynching black children and black men, and even if they glance at a white woman. And in America, we also have a history of giving wealthy, well-connected, usually white men a pass when it comes to sexual assault and rape. But if you're a powerful white man, you could be a Supreme Court justice after screaming and yelling and lying at your confirmation hearing about sexually assaulting someone when you were a teenager. And the woman who finally spoke out will be shunned and shamed. And if you have a long history of credible allegations of sexual harassment, sexual assault, and rape, you can be president. And you can even lie about it as president and defame the accuser, and the Department of Justice will take your side and say that if the president lies, it's legal. And even when the lie is about a decades-old rape allegation, if the president lies about that, the government will defend him. I believe Merrick Garland is wrong on the law, but he has also shown his hand. I fear that I was wrong about him. I believe that this brief in the E. Jean Carroll case has shown his hand. I think he agrees with Bill Barr that when push comes to shove, he believes the president is immune from prosecution for obstruction of justice. I truly hope I'm wrong. All right, there you go. That's Jen Taub on Twitter, law professor at Western New England University School of Law. All right, and now, speaking of old people, the president of the United States is Joe Biden, and he went on his first, I think, big overseas trip, and he stopped in the United Kingdom, where he addressed the U.S. Air Force personnel and their families stationed at Royal Air Force Base Mildenhall. And here he is at the beginning of his speech, and all the men and women of the military are standing at attention, and he recognizes that after he starts talking here and tells them to stand at ease, and that he sometimes forgets he's president, why, but he's standing like that and show him all this respect when he walks into a room, and, you know, he's just making conversation. But watch Hannity, he'll say he's got Alzheimer's. Here's that clip.
When I was 14, if you please, at ease. I keep forgetting I'm president. When I was 14 years old, I would have been, I mean this sincerely, scared to death to stand up in front of a microphone with a large crowd or a small crowd. See, when I was a child, I used to stutter badly, for real. I had great difficulty speaking in front of other people. And so I expect that when you're president, you'll remember me. You'll remember me. You're really quite a polished young woman. Thank you.
All right, so that's some of his comments and other comments that he made that made news when recalling his late son, Beau Biden's military service. He also issued a thinly veiled threat to Vladimir Putin as U.S.-Russian tensions escalate, and here's that.
I'm so proud to be here with all of you to kick off my first overseas trip as president. I've been in and out of here many, many times. I've visited well over 100 countries as president or chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee, or I mean, as vice president or chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee. This is my first overseas trip as president of the United States. I'm heading to the G7, then to the NATO ministerial, and then to meet with Mr. Putin to let him know what I want him to know. And at every point along the way, we're going to make it clear that the United States is back and democracies of the world are standing together to tackle the toughest challenges and the issues that matter most to our future. That we're committed to leading with strength, defending our values, and delivering for our people. America is better positioned to advance our national security and our economic prosperity when we bring together like-minded nations to stand with us.
All right, there you go. There's President Biden yesterday at Royal Air Force Base in Mildenhall, Suffolk, England, ahead of the G7 summit, which you're going to hear a lot of news. Can't wait to see the videos, the pictures of him standing, sitting, pointing in Vladimir Putin's face, hopefully. And finally, here's what I wish the Senate Judiciary Chairman, Pat Leahy, sounded like. Senator Raphael Warnock of Georgia at a rally yesterday, trying to get people fired up and remind them where they came from, where he came from. I like this clip, and I wanted to share it with you here at the end of the last 24.
Well, hello, everybody. Sisters and brothers, we are in a 911 emergency when it comes to our democracy. And it's so important that we not miss this moment, that we misapprehend the gravity and the significance of what we will do in this moment. I've only been in the Senate a little while. And I've already been there long enough to realize that it's easy for folk who become a part of this institution to become cynical, to say that we go and we debate various issues, and there is a practical side. We debate certain things, we win some, we lose some, we come back to the next Congress. But let me be very clear, this is not just some ordinary moment. What they are trying to do in Georgia and all across this country is to squeeze the voices of the people out of their democracy such that they can have minority rule, and we will not allow that to happen. I'm a proud son of Georgia. Don't talk bad about my state. I love Georgia. And all of you out here owe a debt of gratitude to Georgia. Right? Who would have thought that at the end of the election on November 4th, that we would be waiting to see who would have the majority in the Senate? And who would have thought that both of those seats that we needed to win would be in one state? And of all the states, it would be Georgia. And who would have thought that Georgia would deliver? But Georgia delivered.
All right, there you go. Well, that's ending on a high note, huh? That is the last 24, and now it's time for everything else I can find in the news. Rapid fire, time for the news dump.
Sign language chimpanzee acting like a grump. His prominent middle fingers on today's news dump.
Hey, that's a messed up chimp, man. Giving the finger to somebody who's hearing impaired? Life is hard enough. You got to be a dick? Come on, can't find a friendly chimp? Thank you, Pete Coe, for the news dump jingle. Okay, let's do it, shall we? Let's start first with the big news yesterday, the announcement from the Biden administration that the U.S. will buy 500 million vaccine doses to donate poorer nations. President Biden teasing the announcement before embarking for the G7 summit. And there's been a lot of pressure for that move, so that's very good news. The deal calls for 200 million doses delivered this year and distributed through the global vaccine program called COVAX. Another 300 million would be delivered in the first half of 2022. About time. A federal appeals court has blocked the sweeping Missouri abortion law. Federal appeals court panel blocked Missouri from enforcing a sweeping state abortion law that bans the procedures at or after 8 weeks of pregnancy. So that's good. A 3-judge panel, the 8th Circuit, U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals in St. Louis, heard arguments in September, and the measure would also prohibit a woman from having an abortion because the fetus has Down syndrome. And nearly 4 years after white supremacists marched through Charlottesville, Virginia, protesting a proposal to take down a Confederate statue, city leaders have unanimously voted to remove the Robert E. Lee Monument and another. Yeah, that's right. Charlottesville unanimously voted to remove Robert E. Lee, Stonewall Jackson statues. And so that is also progress, and I applaud it. Good job. All right. Hey, have you seen the plexiglass everywhere? Well, a new reporting says there's no proof it's keeping COVID at bay. So whether you're at a restaurant or a retail store, grocery store, or I stood behind it at a comedy club, apparently it doesn't work. Not a single study has shown the clear plastic barriers actually stop the spread of the virus. And I would always move around them like they were in my way to talk to the cashier, and they'd always give me a weird look, and I'm like, oh, sorry, that's there for a reason. So now we know it's actually not. It's not actually working. Back to abortion. I should have had this in order. A record high, according to Gallup, of 47% say abortion is morally acceptable. How about that? Yeah, a new study published Wednesday says that 47% of respondents in the survey said they think abortion is morally acceptable, with 46% saying they find it morally wrong. So we're pretty evenly split, yet a majority believes that. Jesus, so hard for me. Moving on, let me move on. It's the news dump. Come on, here's some good news. The company that was building the Keystone XL pipeline officially nixed it. That's right. Rest in, I was going to say peace. Keystone Pipeline. That's what my friend Dr. Michael Mann tweeted, but I don't want it to rest in peace. Anyway, they are scrapping the project after President Biden nixed a border crossing permit for it. A statement from TC Energy said that after a comprehensive review of its options and in consultation with its partner, the government of Alberta has terminated the Keystone XL pipeline project. That is a result and a win because of climate activists. So that's a huge, huge story and a great story as well. Yesterday, we found out that the restaurant chain Chipotle was going to be raising the prices of its burritos like 36 cents or something. And apparently, they'd raise prices on the menu about 4%, after saying in May it was going to raise employees' wages to an average of $15 an hour or a range of $11 to $18 an hour. Is anybody in America that goes to Chipotle going to be pissed about that? That they're raising their prices 4%, but that they're giving their employees a raise? I mean, is anybody going to stop going on principle? Can't afford the 36 more cents? Here's more good news. The city of Seattle is winning. First major U.S. city to see 70% of residents fully vaccinated, according to the mayor there. How about that? Good job. Seattle. Also, San Jose passed the state of Vermont. Wait, let me see. What am I reading? Seattle is the first major city. 69% of San Francisco residents over age 12 have been fully vaccinated. And San Jose passed the state of Vermont, which is leading all states. In fact, why are they comparing San Jose to Vermont? All right, sorry for getting hung up there. Finally, speaking of statues, France is sending a second Statue of Liberty to the United States. Yeah, they gave us the first one, in case you forgot your history. But the new statue is just shy of 10 feet tall, and it's going to be at Ellis Island, and it's an exact replica, and right-wingers want to take it down because it's representative of liberty and not oppression and welcoming to immigrants as opposed to wanting to enslave them. So, yeah, I just made that last part up. All right, that is your news dump for Thursday, except for if you're listening really early in the morning. Even if you didn't, I do want to mention the annular solar eclipse that's set to take place at 6:53 a.m. So look east, ladies and gentlemen. I want to get up and watch that. A total solar eclipse, when the moon passing directly between the Earth and sun, completely blocking the sun's light. Well, this is an annual solar eclipse. The moon does not completely cover the sun as it passes, leaving a glowing ring of sunlight visible. The Ring of Fire solar eclipse coming tomorrow, unless you already missed it because you're listening to the podcast after 7 a.m. on Thursday, June 9th, 10th. Okay, that is your news dump. And now it's time to get to my first guest, who I always love talking to and following on Twitter. She's so good on Twitter, at Behind Your Back on Twitter. She's a humor writer. She's an activist. Her work has appeared in McSweeney's, The New Yorker. She was named one of Rolling Stone's top 25 funniest Twitter accounts in 2016. Not writing comedy, she is an activist. She worked extensively with nonprofits in diverse sectors, including political action campaigns, international arts collectives, health and human services organization, and she also is now the executive director of taxmarch.org. And I wanted to talk with her about the reporting from ProPublica that we mentioned yesterday, that I talked a lot about, as well as, we get into it when I get into my conversation with Maura Quint. But first we start with, as we always do when Maura's on, talking about all kinds of different things, including people's relationships with their hairstylist. Maura just got her haircut, and we were talking about it, so I just hit record. Here we go. Maura Quint, at Behind Your Back on Twitter, taxmarch.org. Let's do it.
Hey.
Okay, now I've hit record.
Okay.
And we're talking about relationships people have with their stylists, and not necessarily women. I think this is probably true of men as well, but
I literally today had a conversation with a man who was basically saying one of his closest relationships was the guy who cuts his hair. He's the one person who knows everything that's going on in his life.
Do you think, that's sad, but do you think that it's a straight man thing, a gay man thing? Or I think straight men care about their hair. I'm way out of my depth here. Obviously it's been a while, but so do you think that matters at all? A man's relationship with his hair have anything to do with his sexuality, his masculinity, his anything?
Well, now we're talking about a whole different thing.
You're
but
right.
I do think that the relationship with the person who cuts your hair is almost secondary to your relationship with your hair. You can cultivate this ongoing, I see this person at regular intervals, even if I don't give a shit about my hair. And now we have a relationship. And that's the whole thing. They generally are pretty friendly and outgoing. They talk to you and they ask you questions, but I don't like telling people about my life. So I tend to flip the script. I'm always asking them. So I tend to know more about my stylist's lives than they know about me.
So how many stylists have you been in relationships with?
My number's really high, Pete. It's a high number. I don't know what normal is, but
Are they littered all over the country? Because you lived in different places.
I've been through some states, I got a stylist.
You've heard a lot
state.
of people. You've used a lot of people for their.
It's happened. It's true.
It's weird because I was telling you, my mom has had a lot of stylists, and she takes it into she becomes friends with them, and then I don't mind saying this on the record. But I know my mom's listening, and then she has to break up with them and that's weird. It's got to be tough. I should ask her. I should get her opinion, but
it is hard. You should get her opinion, but like I have had to break up with stylists, but I tend to ghost. Like I do. I just tend to like, all right, I'm just never going to talk to them again. And they'll just wonder. And the worst is when you get that like text or call from the salon being like, hey, haven't seen you in a while. Just wanted to check in, like, see if you need a cut. And you just have to like hit ignore or be like, just letting it grow out for a couple of years or something. Like, just totally have to make up some other lie. Like, it's not you, it's me.
I'm glad I don't have to have that. That's one less relationship with a person in my like that. I mean, I have no problem talking to people and being, and you know, I'm unlike you. I think I share probably everything too much, but I think that would be weird. You have to move on. It's like a dentist. I'm trying to relate to it, but I can't. I don't have anything like that. Like, I don't have any beauty. I don't have any kind of person that I see, I guess.
I have like, you know, I have two, I should say. But like, it's all, you know, various, whatever. But in this case, so like I had a person in DC and I like her, but she canceled on me and I wasn't going to be able to get back to DC. And so this salon opened across the street from me and I was like, well, I should give them a try. And I haven't had any good luck with any sort of hairstylist in my area. So I was like, I didn't have high hopes. But the worst part is the woman who was cutting my hair is like, you look really familiar. Have I met you? And I was like, no, I don't think so. And then she kept asking me questions and I find out she like basically lives across the street from my parents. And like, she did meet me 2 years ago at a like neighborhood party.
That's why you don't want to go local. That's why I don't want to go local to get your hair.
It was terrible. And I'm never going back because I mean, she did a fine job, but
I was going to say it looks awful. I don't know. What did she do to you?
It's fully fine. Like, but it looks like when I cut my hair, like, it's just like, oh, you've made it okay. Like, it's shorter, but not styled right. Like, it's not quite good.
Well, I think, I'm fascinated by those types of relationships, especially now as people are, you know, coming back. And I'm also really interested in the conversation around returning to the normal time. You and I can always talk about everything, but I want to talk with you about taxes.
You didn't have me on to talk about my hair? That's what I thought this whole thing was. That's what I was prepped for, Pete.
Well, the truth is, for people that don't know, which is everybody, we were talking about your hair, and then you were being so funny. I was like, how am I not recording this? And so we kind of redid it.
Stop being funny.
Not at all. You nailed it.
I was just like,
no. You're a hair salon. You're very promiscuous with your stylists throughout your life. And I think that's probably common.
A little bit of a hair slut. What are you going to do?
I think it's common. It sounds like it's common. I don't know what the data is, but we did get data on taxes, and I want to talk about that with you. But before that, still, you say you don't necessarily love talking about yourself. I get that, but you did tweet out, and I can't, you know, a lot of my listeners follow you on Twitter, that you had a life happened to you. You got lifed the other night. There are things that can just completely change the trajectory of your day and your life. And I think a flat tire or a car accident or a freak accident. You had a freak accident, a few nights ago, and you tweeted about it, and you're in the hospital. And so I just want to, you know, see how you're doing and see what happened. How did life get you?
You know, more than one person actually was just like, oh, you got Final Destinationed. Like,
I don't know what that means. I don't know what that means. I didn't see that.
It's where like weird things they're trying to, I don't know. I haven't seen it either, but my understanding is like strange deaths. Like you're trying to be killed by the universe kind of thing.
Oh, he's trying to get you.
This was just a freak accident. Yeah.
What happened?
But the stupidest thing in the world. I was like reaching up a top shelf. I knocked off a ceramic decorative bowl I had there. It shattered, bounced, and one of the shards just sliced me and like hit, I guess, an arterial vein or something. I don't know, but it was like a Tarantino movie, basically, at that point. It was just
splatter film in your kitchen. Like, really? Oh, gross.
Yeah, no, it was
How do you
intense.
do with blood?
Huh?
How do you do with blood in general? Yours, your kids? I mean, it's different when it's your kids.
Like, if you put on a gory movie for me, I will like cover my eyes like a child and like and complain
Me
and
too.
like I don't like I'm like that.
Yeah.
If I'm in an emergency situation, it's just like that. All that turns off. It's just like, all right, yep, let's go. Like, I have no desire. I couldn't go through medical school, but I could be an ER nurse kind of thing. Like in the trauma moment, like I can jump in and just deal.
So you tweet about this. Then you tied a rag around your ankle with a bag chip clip. And then you made jokes about snacks. I mean, you made jokes throughout the whole thing, and you took us through it on Twitter. but then you drove yourself to the hospital all bloody, and you're a very tough human being. I don't think most people would necessarily be able to figure that out and do that without panicking and losing their brain. Well, like I said, I mean, I know already, like I jump into action in sort of stressful moments. But I am definitely someone who walks around, like I walked around for 3 days with a broken hand. Like I'm definitely like, it'll get better. We'll see. It's fine. And so it was really, really nice to see that actually my instincts, like when it comes to life or death type things, override this sort of obstinate sort of I can power through it. No, you gained like a new kind of confidence you weren't expecting to gain, certainly that day, much less at all. But through that kind of accident, adversity, you built like a resilience. Like if this happens, that's a great takeaway. That's a very positive takeaway. Good for you on that. How was the hospital experience? Last question. Sorry. No. I mean, hey, like I can talk you through the whole thing because it's still very, very, flashy in my brain. But like, it's one of those things where when you know things are bad, when you walk into the ER and the other people waiting in the ER just gasp and go, take her first. Like, that's when you're like, oh, okay, this is not a great thing. Oh man. And you're kind of like thanking them. Like you had the one item behind the person with 12 items. You're like, thank you for letting me ahead. Appreciate that. Exactly. Like I'll be quick. That's really, thank you. Oh, wow. They saw how bloody you were. It was like within 2 seconds. I don't think I said any words. I even took a picture because I was so like kind of trying to even maintain sort of consciousness. And I was kind of doing that through focusing on my phone, bizarrely. I know that's like a weird thing to say, but I took a picture of my foot after standing in the ER for 2 minutes and there was like a pool of blood around me already. So and so they like threw me in a wheelchair and the nurses wheeled me back and they're all shouting to each other, and that kind of like I'm in a Was there music playing, like tense music? Yeah, in my head there was definitely 100%. And they like, were there any hot doctors? They're like yelling and doing things to my leg. And they're like really concerned. And they get me into the room and they're like, do you think you can get into the bed? And I just looked at them and I was like, I drove myself here. So yeah, no, I think I can stand up from the chair to the bed. Like They didn't have quite the context of who you were and what you had done. You're like, I bag clipped a tourniquet. I think I'll be able to hop up in that bed. So then are you just kind of there in the ER alone late at night kind of thing? Yeah, that's why I was like sort of tweeting actually, because I did have those like waves of being kind of like feeling very alone and scared. And so it was just sort of like a way to project out and kind of like connect with people when I felt most vulnerable. Yeah, I'm glad that you did that. I'm really glad that you did that. I like when people are very vulnerable and on Twitter, because in your case, your Twitter feed is just curated very well. You can tweet about politics and policy and obviously life, and you're hilarious. And so your followers, I think, really get to know you a bit and like you. And this is true of a lot of people, and you have a huge following. So in this case, like, what was the reaction? Did your Twitter followers, your tweeps, did they give you a hug? So nice. Was anybody horrifically mean? You goddamn. No, it was incredibly like kind. Everyone, I mean, to the point where like as someone who really enjoys my misanthropy, I was like, God damn it, is this gonna fucking ruin it? Like this like kindness of spirit of the world, like this is making it really hard to hate humanity right now. Like everyone was so nice, and in fact, even like a couple people like DM me their phone number, and they're like, if you need to. I mean, it was just really, really, really. Was Alex Rodriguez one of them by any chance? I don't think so. No, sorry. You looking for digits? He takes advantage of some really interesting situations with people. Interesting. No, I don't think that. However, because like, look, I hadn't slept the night before. I was camping with my kids, so I was exhausted. I'm in the ER. I've lost a lot of blood. I'm not saying that like I'm in my clearest mind, but it in no way occurred to me when I posted the picture that like, oh, you're putting your feet on the internet. Did not at all occur to me. But in the several days since, I have been reminded quite a bit that, yes, I posted a picture that included my feet and put it onto the internet. Oh, well, I was thinking, that's funny you say that, because I was thinking you put your legs on the internet. Because the picture is of like your thigh down to your foot, showing where the cut had been, I guess, healed or stitched together, right? At that point, just cauterized together. I'm trying to describe the wound. Stitching. Yeah. But you could see the slice. But so what, people had foot stuff to say?
Yeah, there was lots of
sexual in nature, or like.
I mean, no one was like outright like. There was no like, I want you to step on my balls or anything. Like, it didn't go like to that level per se. But
I DM'd you that actually, and you can tell people. You could. That's all I said. By the way, I didn't say anything else about the accident. I was like, nice feet. Smash my nuts with them someday.
Yeah,
Ew.
no, I forgot about that.
Ew. Yikes.
Yeah.
It's really fun.
No, there were just comments on my feet, like, which was just, it was like, that's not the point. And the other thing too is that my feet and like there was blood splatter on them too. And like, this was just not like a sexy picture of feet, you know, and like high heels with like, it was not the situation.
To some people. Maybe some people like blood and feet.
That's really upsetting, but definitely some people do.
Well, you took a lot from it. You learned a lot from it, and it's just also always a lesson. I think it's just weird things. You got life. That's why I keep saying you got. Life happened in a very unpredictable way, in a very in a night like you weren't expecting to be in the. You're never expecting to be in the hospital, and
no one is expecting to drive themselves to the ER at 11 o'clock on a Sunday night. That's no.
You're doing okay though. You're walking. Everything's okay. You're healed up. Nice scar. I mean, you psyched?
Yeah. I've got 7 stitches in my leg, and I'm walking, hobbling a little bit. But yeah, I mean, I'm gonna be fine.
I like scars. I think they're attractive on people most of the time because they say that here's a life I lived. It's like an external way of saying these are my physical scars. You can't see my emotional scars unless you watch my act. But I like physical scars. I think they're unique. I don't know.
They're definitely stories, at least. They're entryways to stories, which is interesting. And you and I like talking to people, so we like stories. So that makes sense.
All right, let's talk taxes in this ProPublica story. A couple other things I definitely want to ask you if we have time. But huge story. ProPublica said it's their biggest story ever, their most important story ever. And the reactions have been, it's interesting to see how things get picked up and who picks them up. Of course, you're the executive director of Tax March. I've told everybody about it. So you have a lot to say about this. And I guess my question is, and I've talked about the story a little bit, though, is were you surprised by anything here? Isn't this just proof? But you weren't surprised. You knew this was all the way it worked.
No, none of this was surprising in the slightest. This is all sort of the stuff. It's one of those we've been saying for some time. Yeah, absolutely. But it's great to see it put together in this way and to have all of that backing and that proof. It's a fantastic piece. I mean, just in general, also tax policy, not that exciting, not that interesting. And so just being able to say, hey, this is actually an interesting piece to read. You can get a lot out of it. You can take it through. It's well written, which, sometimes when we're talking about economic stuff, it gets left behind a little bit. So nothing surprising to me, but definitely really important for everyone to take in.
I'll read just a quick thing from ProPublica. Our analysis of tax data for the 25 richest Americans quantifies just how unfair the system has become. By the end of 2018, the 25 people they're talking about here, richest, were worth $1.1 trillion. For comparison, it would take 14.3 million ordinary American wage earners put together to equal that same amount of wealth. The personal federal tax bill for the top 25 in 2018, $1.9 billion. The bill for the wage earners, the 14.3 million, $143 billion. So it is just the data to prove not only in theory how we think the system is rigged, but in practice, how it actually is, in fact, rigged.
Right.
How'd I do?
That's absolutely right. You did a great job. That was perfect. You summed it up completely. I mean, ultimately, that's the point. The wealthy have created this tremendous system where they get to not pay as much in taxes as we do. They pay much lower effective rates. And, it's tricky, too, because it's one of those things where we sort of, not all of us, but many of us kind of justify the way things are. And we sort of look at it like, well, that's how it has to be. And instead, what we need to be seeing is that this is something that has been put in place over a period of time. It's a series of policy choices that have been made specifically to benefit the rich. And it doesn't have to be that way. We can make other policy choices. We have this opportunity and this ability.
The arguments are so convincing. I mean, I know we've talked about this before, but the arguments that people make are so convincing. But I feel like Well, my reaction to this is always, every time I hear this kind of information, every time I think about our tax system, I always just simply think, I'm sorry for being so unoriginal, but like, this is why we can't have nice things. We can talk about the budget and the way we spend money and how we spend way too much on defense and things like that. But it would fundamentally change society in America if we were to use these taxes and this wealth to spend on important things for education, healthcare, energy, and so on. And you see this being talked about more in progressive circles, obviously. But what are your thoughts about what this? How do you convince people why this is such a problem that these people make so much and pay so little in?
So, it gets tricky because there are a couple of different things that I want to say sort of all at the same time. And so I'll start with the fact that we can have nice things. We can afford them. We should be making major investments. And frankly, we should go ahead and deficit finance. It's okay to do that. We don't have to worry necessarily about paying for. But if that is your concern, if that is your argument, if your argument is how can we afford it? Well, hey, very simple. If that's what you're concerned about, we can afford it really, really easily by taxing the rich at a higher level, at higher levels, which we have historically always done. Like this is a unique place in our history where we are taxing the rich at these incredibly low levels. We have taxed them higher throughout history, and we can go back in that one way. It's like, it's like Lost. Like,
yeah, no, I think that's such a, well, I'm not sure how I feel about the Lost reference, but
sorry, that's what comes into my head.
Well, it is Michael J. Fox's birthday. And so I'm thinking about Back to the Future. We can go back.
Okay. Yeah, right. That's better. I like that one better.
But more importantly, your point about where we used to be, you were tweeting about this too, like tax structure under Reagan. It's gotten so out of control how low taxes have become. And the conversation around it is so hyperbolic and ridiculous. But in fact, we've had tax rates. And what did that change about anybody's life? What did that change about anything when folks and companies paid more taxes? It's such an important point to make, the perspective one about where taxes have been in the past. But we're so far from getting anywhere near that. And nobody's even proposing that, Maura. Nobody's even saying that.
No one's even proposing that we go back before when Trump was in office.
Right,
like that's how ridiculous it is.
Negotiation, yeah.
But then additionally on top of that, when we look at not even just the economic issue of taxes, but when we look at taxes as a democracy issue, it becomes also incredibly vital because what we have now is we are allowing the wealthiest to amass these just inconceivable levels of wealth. Like, when I don't know if you've ever seen any of the sort of visualizations of the type of wealth that someone like Bezos has, but people try to create these visual narratives to just get people to understand it. Because when we talk in billions, we don't conceptualize it in our brain right. It doesn't really make sense. We go from like $10 to $100, which is not at all sort of the type of difference. But we're talking about people who are being allowed to just hold on to tremendous amounts of money. They're, taking it out of the system. They're hoarding this wealth so that no one else can access it, which is its own problem. But
Bezos is buying the biggest yacht in the world, and he's sending himself to space. So he's
spending nothing of his money to do so. Percentage wise, it's like nothing. He's doing that the way that you go down to the corner and you buy yourself a bag of potato chips. Like, it's just like, okay, that didn't really impact your wealth in the slightest. That's how he's doing these ridiculous things because that's how much he has. But when you have this many people with this much money, what they're then able to do is channel, again, small streams for them, but vast amounts of money into politics. And they're able to influence the laws that are being written, who's being elected, how they're governing. Like that becomes a huge, huge issue too. So even if none of the money that we were taxing went into paying for things that we need, even if it were just, a friend of mine who was an economist used to always say, like, if we just took that money and then we just lit it on fire, we'd still be better off. We'd still be one step ahead. And that's true because right now this amassing of wealth is creating a tremendous amount of problems.
Yeah, no, you nailed it. There's been so much written about this, and it's an open conversation now. Sheldon Whitehouse is a Democratic senator. He's talked about in his book Capture the Influence of Money, but I've been talking about it with people for years. And what you're talking about is the lobbying that they And then so much of the effort of the lobbying is to change the rules around their money and how they make it. And not necessarily as much the individuals, but the industry lobbying, colluding, saying, give us this loophole, this incentive, if we do business this way. And it's completely, I don't know what to say. I just was trying to punctuate where you're talking about in terms of the lobbying, where all that money goes. And that's what they do, to rig the system further. So you are trying to unrig it with Tax March. So what are you asking? What are you saying? I just retweeted all your tweets, but call your rep and demand, what do we want? What do you guys want? What are you advocating for with your nonprofit as a result of this horrific news?
There are so many different ways for us to change the system. I mean, really, there are a lot. And I really actually would start with, we should all be paying attention to local races, local politics, and we should be putting people in office who value these same sort of things. I mean, taxing the wealthy is incredibly popular. It's popular across the board. I mean, even a majority of Republicans think we need to be taxing the rich, at least a majority of Republican voters, not a majority of Republican office holders. Very
Important
different.
differentiation.
Yeah. But a majority of the actual public all agree that we need to be taxing the rich at higher rates. So what we need individuals in office who hold these same values. So that's one thing I think is incredibly important. People should be looking into local, state, and national races, but especially local and state races, and making sure that the candidates are being asked these questions and that they are voting for people who hold the same sort of values and ideals and are actually fighting to unrig this economic system. I mean, from a national perspective at Tax March, there's a lot right now. I mean, Biden, for what anyone thought he was going to do per se, has actually been pushing pretty hard on these sort of tax issues, and in a really good way. And he's not the only one. There are other Dems who have put forth a lot of proposals that need support. And so there's lots of ways to sort of call your representative or call your senator and let them know that you want them to be supporting something like a wealth tax or something like equalizing capital gains, which is, I believe, Wyden's proposal, where capital gains right now are taxed at a lower rate than you're getting taxed for going to work at the Dairy Queen.
For
that's
any
ridiculous.
job that you get paid on your actual work. It's not, people always talk about wage earners more, but I always just think about if you work today, 8 hours, 10 hours, people work all the time now. I mean, you're doing work. You're sitting in front of your goddamn computer.
Yeah, you're getting a paycheck. If you're getting a paycheck, you're doing work.
Yeah,
and you're doing work if you're not too, but that's a whole other conversation.
That's a good point. But I mean, in the time that you spend at your job, and it's a fair argument to talk about, I work really hard and I don't want all my money to go to taxes. That's fine. But if you believe that, then you need to understand how the system is rigged for people who aren't working. Their money is making the money. Their investments are making the money, and they're not paying even what you're paying on your actual work. Sorry, I'm ranting. Sorry.
No,
Sorry.
it's fine. What's really frustrating and infuriating is that right now we're seeing Republicans are trying to they're trying to sort of smear this hey, the Dems want to raise your taxes. And they're coming at it from that angle, which is just an absurdity because everything we're talking about right now, I mean, Biden's proposal is to increase taxes on people making over $400,000. Yeah. It's the top 2% of not just people too, but also small businesses, top 2%. We're not talking about your actual local little, coffee shop. That's not the case.
You're not even talking about super wealthy business owners, what I would call super wealthy. Yeah. I mean, you're talking about, the very top. It's crazy that message doesn't get through.
Well, and then what's more frustrating, sorry, now I'm ranting, goddamn it.
You're the guest.
What's more frustrating is that what the Republicans are actually then proposing is, in fact, to pass on taxes to the middle class through user fees and gas taxes and things that actually will impact the middle and working class people in order to protect the tax cuts that they gave to the rich. So, I mean, that's what they're putting on the table right now. And so that's the sort of thing that we can be making phone calls. We can be, shouting about as loudly as possible because they're definitely trying to spin it. And they do a great job with that. They have fantastic abilities for spin, but it's all bullshit.
I got to say, I feel bad now what I said earlier. Your hair looks really good when you talk about taxes.
Thank you. It does not. I hate it. And I'm sitting here obsessing and staring at it and being the bangs are all wrong. And it's a whole thing.
Oh, I love when you talk about how the system is rigged. You could be wearing a bald cap and it still looks good because you're so good at talking
that's
about
what I need to be wearing.
That's a bunch of really, really good points. And I'm sure there are more, but I want to ask you two more kind of completely different questions. Do you have time to do two more?
I'm here.
Okay. Before we started talking, and I saw this last night, and you and I have talked a lot about COVID, science, vaccines, and you tweet about this. Have you seen these videos of the people sticking metal to themselves and the conspiracy around that? Have you heard about that?
Oh God, I haven't.
Oh shit! I should have sent
metal to themselves.
I should have sent it to you before we started talking.
That's
Maura,
okay. Is it like the vaccine is giving you electromagnetic properties?
It's the vaccine has, some vaccines have trace metals in them, and so does water, so does everything, so does food.
Right.
And it's not an issue. But these don't. These actually don't. But people are going around, sticking. There's this video that's gone viral. You're going to see it now, and you're going to lose your mind. You're going to text me.
Oh, God.
But let me just ask you your thoughts on the anti-vax movement before or, since COVID, because it was a pretty bad problem before COVID broke out and these vaccines were developed uncharacteristically rapid and made people concerned about them. But what do you think, Maura? What do you think about the anti-vax movement and anti-vaxxers and stuff? How do you deal with that?
It's incredibly alarming. Obviously, vaccines are needed. Everyone needs to sort of be vaccinated. There needs to be a mass amount of people who are vaccinated in order for things to be effective and in order for us to protect the individuals who can't be vaccinated for various reasons. So, I mean, it's a communal good. It's frustrating because so many of the ways that these sort of conspiracy theories go is through these areas where people are open in some way, where they're concerned. It comes from a place of caring and, maybe good. I don't know if you want to like classify it, but it often comes from these places of like, you have to be worried about your children. You have to be worried about, and you have to take care of them. And it's on you to protect yourself and others and the people that you care about. And so it's like, it sort of gets in through this place where people are vulnerable because, of course, they want to protect the people that they love. And it's just so insidious and awful because it has the exact opposite effect. And it affects more than just the individual and their family. It affects society at large. It's an incredibly, incredibly frustrating thing. And I'm not sure how we reverse it. I mean, people are prone to conspiracy theories. It does a lot for individuals in the same way that they're prone to I don't know, want community and want to feel, important and valued in some way. Like it has all of these sort of effects. And I don't know what the answer is, but it's
that's a really good way of saying it, in the way that we're vulnerable to wanting to feel community and also vulnerable to being afraid of getting sick in this case. How are you dealing with it, like with your kids and your social life as we start to come out? I mean, do you just, like, we had a few people over last weekend and I didn't ask if anybody was vaccinated because I just assumed it because these are close friends. But, and then we've got our kids my daughters are 13 and 16. They both got one shot. But I mean, like, as we start to come out of it, do you know people, does it ever come up? People are anti-vax and do you have to ask? And I don't know how to approach it.
I ask because I have lots of interactions now with people and have just from various things, like we've been pet sitting and stuff. So there's just meetings with strangers. So I've just gotten really comfortable with, I ask in a sort of like, I'm vaccinated here, it's just for your comfort. Here's my, but I always have a mask on me and and keep it and I'm prepared and sort of state my situation and then let them sort of tell me where they are. But I mean, my kids are younger and so they haven't had shots and they won't have the opportunity to do it for some time. And while they're, obviously there is a lot of data out there showing that the younger kids are far, far less likely to be affected by this, you still want to be careful too. So, so I try to keep things to outside right now, which, is easier to do, but it's definitely a conversation I'm continually having with people.
All right. Last thing I want to ask you, Joe Manchin, go.
I don't know Joe Manchin's thing. I mean, like, everyone is got their theory on what his deal is, whether he believes his shit. Does he just want to be in the center of attention? Does he just want to look like he's trying? I don't know. I think he's just a fucking asshole, frankly. That's my 2 cents on him. I don't know what the special button is to push, but I would be much happier if we could just ignore him and, and go around him in some way. I don't think he deserves the attention he gets, honestly.
How do you think that Senate Democrats are handling, any of these pieces of legislation that they're trying to get passed, from voting rights to infrastructure and the Biden administration? There's a lot of it seems like it's been pretty tough for progressives and Democrats lately.
Yeah. You know what's standing in their way? Filibuster. We should get rid of it. That's what I think.
What about the argument that it then destroys the institution, and more importantly, then Republicans won't need it? What do you say to them?
So the filibuster was not in the Constitution, hasn't been around the whole time. The filibuster is something that was added in. It's a more recent development. It can be taken out just the same. Same with something like ICE. Like, these things come in and we think, oh, they've always been there and we just have to, there's nothing else to do. We got to protect our institutions. It's bullshit. It's just new stuff. It's same with tax law. All of this is just policy stuff that has been introduced. We can take it out just as easily. It's okay to do so.
Where are you on drones refueling fighter jets now? I'm thinking about other things that we don't necessarily need. I should have asked you, instead of my 2-word question being Joe Manchin, I should just said 1 word, filibuster, because you clearly are locked and loaded on that, and I couldn't agree with you more. So
fuck the filibuster. That's what I got to say there.
Is that trending? Is that a hashtag?
Fuck the filibuster? I haven't seen it. I don't know. It's not on a t-shirt yet, but if anyone has one, please let me know.
When you type the word, do you ever struggle with its spelling? I do every time. And I'm a pretty good speller. I mean, I make a lot of typos, but I'm usually a pretty good speller. But filibuster, I always forget how it's spelled.
It's 1 or 2 L's, right? Like, that's where I get lost.
Oh, yes, but I actually am dumber. I actually sometimes want to... I can't even believe I'm going to say this. I can't. I think I sometimes want to write Phil, like it's named after
Philadelphia, like a filibuster.
Yeah, I think I might.
By the way, how is there not like a fucking bar now called the Philip, like in Philly,
or a band, or yeah? You should not have said that. I'll have to edit that out so we can sell it.
Maybe ending with an A too, filibuster.
Filibuster. Get rid of it. Fuck the filibuster. Maura, thank you as always for joining me. I really appreciate your time, and I can't thank you enough. Thank you. Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
All right. There she goes, Maura Quint, taxmarch.org, at Behind Your Back on Twitter. Always great to catch up with Maura. Love talking to her. People were pumped when I told them last night at the Hangout that Maura was going to join us, and always fun, always great. And support her organization. Follow her on Twitter. Let her know that you heard her here on the show. And we always got to get her on. Okay, so moving on, my second guest, another regular, and I love following him on Twitter as well, at SpeechBoy71. He's recently left the corporate media world, like I did, to go and do independent media with his new Substack, and he's doing some podcasts. He's great. He's Michael Cohen, not that one. He's on Twitter at, I said, but the website truthandcons.com, truthandcons.substack.com, and he's created a special discounted rate if anybody wants to subscribe to his newsletter, which I do and love, and you can go to the links and the show notes for that. Here's my conversation with Michael Cohen, who gave me, as always, a great perspective on how to pay attention to what's going on in the world of politics and more. Here we go. Michael Cohen, right now.
Hello.
Michael Cohen.
How are you, friend?
I'm recording.
Oh, okay. You know what? Let me put the headphones on. Hold on a second.
I'm coming in hard and fast.
Wow. Dude, you know what? That's a little too much.
Homoeroticism. Well, what people don't know is that earlier I sent you some filthy texts about how aroused and excited I was that you were available to talk to me at short notice. And you were upset by it, and you said you didn't desire the images that I created in your mind.
It didn't really work for me.
Well, but I say, first of all, I say deal with it. But more importantly, the Bert and Ernie gif you sent to me was a keeper. I will steal it. It made me laugh very hard.
It is without a doubt, in my opinion, the greatest gif of all time. And that gif works for everything.
Oh, now, yeah, you sound good. All right.
Okay.
There he is.
All right.
Michael Cohen.
Oh, you know what? Shit. Hold on one second. I got to plug in my. Hold on one second.
But there's a few questions that are kind of obvious that I want to get to, and you're just the guy I wanted to ask these questions to.
Okay, let's do it.
Okay, so first of all, you just got an email. I think I just heard an email come in.
Yeah.
It feels like this has been a tough week for Democrats and progressives, and it feels like that for a couple of reasons. That's one kind of generally I wanted to talk to you, get your take. But what is happening, and what is your interpretation of what is happening with the negotiations between the Biden administration and Senate Democrats with Republicans, I guess, in the Senate on an infrastructure bill? Because I read this morning, Senate Democrats are frustrated with the Biden administration. You've been tweeting about this. What is happening? Who's trusting who? Is this theater?
It's theater. I don't take very seriously the day-to-day of what's happening in Congress because, let's just talk about infrastructure first. I think, I wrote a piece about last week where I basically said the infrastructure bill is going to pass. It's going to pass with, all Democratic votes. It's probably almost certainly going to pass through budget reconciliation process. There are not 10 Republicans who will support a infrastructure bill to break a filibuster. And so what you're seeing now is just kind of a political theater in which, I think all sides know how this is going to end up. But for reasons that I think don't make a lot of sense, but, they exist, they think they have to go through the process of pretending as though they are negotiating. But I think the reality is that, like I said, we know what the end game is going to be here.
Okay. Well, that makes a lot more sense. It's interesting because I do listen and pay attention day to day, and my mood and emotions are affected by it. And that's unhealthy, and people shouldn't do that. I do it partially because I cover these things for the daily podcast, but can you give me a life lesson there just in terms of my emotions? Can you be my therapist there on how we shouldn't allow this stuff because it's a longer game, right?
It's a longer game. And I think that,
you can't see it playing out. That's why I called you. Like, I can't see it. Like, what are they doing?
So, it's an infrastructure in particular. I mean, this process of Biden negotiating with Republicans, and it was Senator Capito from West Virginia. I mean, I really understand why reporters feel they have to cover that kind of stuff. But part of me just says you're kind of wasting everyone's time because, like I said, there's no chance that you're going to get 10 Republicans to support anything that Joe Biden wants to do in infrastructure. It's a major priority of his. And they're not going to be supporting what's a major priority of his. They're just not going to do it. I mean, it was interesting that this week you saw this big bill pass on to basically compete with China economically.
Yeah, I just saw that yesterday. $250 billion. I don't know what that means. I didn't read about it. I just saw the headline, but it's undercovered for sure.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because it didn't get a lot of attention. I think it does play into Republican talking points as far as competing with China. And I think it's sort of being under the radar. One of the reasons why that allowed it to pass. The infrastructure bill is one of the bigger priorities for the Biden administration. And I think that once it takes on that higher profile, it's a lot harder for Republicans to get on board with it, because then it looks like you're basically endorsing one of the Democratic president's top legislative priorities. And it's just something that I think they don't want to do. And I think they've made that pretty clear. They don't want to give Biden wins. And, he would like to have a bipartisan bill, which gives them all the more reason not to give him a bipartisan bill. And the extent to which they can argue this is a payoff to blue states and it's, it's too much spending or it's whatever, it's socialist, whatever argument they want to use, they can use that. And of course, they'll still benefit from the bill because infrastructure spending benefits pretty much every state. I mean, the Democrats are not writing a bill in which they're only supporting infrastructure in blue states, in red states also.
No, that would be a Jared Kushner thing to do.
That would be a Mitch McConnell thing to do, to be honest.
Yeah.
But, it's like the Reds, you saw this after the American Rescue Plan passed, which got no Republican votes. You had a number of Republican members of Congress who took credit for, spending initiatives in their districts that came out of the plan. So, I think for Republicans opposing the bill and yet seeing some benefit from it, or at least taking some credit for it, is probably how this is going to play itself out. And I'll just say, to get back to Joe Manchin for a second, look, if you look at his comments, what he has said, I want a bipartisan bill. And when asked, would he go the route of budget reconciliation process, which he did on the American Rescue Plan, he has said, not now, which is, as we say in the poker world, a tell. I mean, I don't think it's a big question about. He's not going to block an incredibly popular multi-trillion-dollar spending bill that's going to benefit him and his constituents. He's not going to block it. But for whatever reason, and I think it's foolish, but this is what he thinks, he has to go through the process of pretending as though there is a bipartisan effort. And so when that effort fails, as it almost certainly will, then he can say, I tried, but we have to go You
don't think that and a lot of people, a lot of progressive, smart commentators, analysts think that it's a waste of time, that we don't have like 500 days till the midterms, and then we may even lose our democracy as we know it. And so you got to get this infrastructure bill done. I can see it both ways. Do you think that this is unnecessary, this kind of reaching out and this theater of, hey, we try, we gave them every opportunity to join us?
I think it's totally unnecessary. But at the same time, it is what Manchin is sort of demanding for his support. And so because of that,
then maybe it is necessary. If that's what Manchin, and you have to give, this is the thing that sounds, people don't want to prostrate, is that the word, themselves? But you have to give Joe Manchin whatever he wants. If there's something that he wants, let's give it to him. Give his wife a job, give him a new houseboat. Do you know he lives on a houseboat?
I did know that, actually. Yeah.
In D.C.?
Yeah.
Whatever he wants. Give him a sailboat. Send him to space with Bezos just to get his vote, I say. That's what I say.
I actually kind of agree with you for the most part. I think it's not just Manchin. I do think that the White House and the President Biden, I think that he believes that he needs to, sit down and have photos taken with Capito and look like he's trying to be bipartisan. I really think the political benefit of that is hugely overrated, like hugely, hugely, hugely overrated. I don't think it matters to most Americans. I don't think it matters really to voters all that much. But for whatever reason, this is what Biden
I have
thinks
a point.
Important.
I
Go
think
ahead.
that you might say, I think you're absolutely right. But because Joe Biden and a lot of other people and some media analysts are so old, they don't realize how much things have changed, because it used to absolutely make sense to do things this way for all the reasons that you're talking about. But we just had 4 years of absolute insanity. We live in a crazy media world where everybody's siloed like these messages are now. We're not listening to the same media outlets, getting the same narrative or story. So they're just living in a bygone era, and that's why they're doing it. It doesn't work. It doesn't matter. Get rid of it. Let's go. Let's move.
I agree. I don't think it matters at all. But, look, I will say this in defense of Biden and his position on this. He's a better politician than any of us are. He is the president of the United States.
How dare you say that to my face?
Sorry, it's true. He does have access to probably better polling than you and I do that may suggest that this does make a difference.
I work out of a garden shed, sir. I have the best polling. A lot of polls.
And look, you know what else? It may be just all about Manchin. Then Manchin may have said to him, and look, Manchin and Biden have a good relationship. Manchin may have said to him at some point, look, this is what I need. This is what I need. And look, I always make this point about the Obamacare. When it passed in 2009, Democrats went through this process of negotiating with Republicans, even though no one thought it was going to lead to anything. And of course, it didn't lead to anything. But they did it in large measure to pacify centrist Democrats.
Yeah.
And at the time, there were quite a few of them. And I think what Democrats were saying was, look, we want to support this bill, but we have to look like we're trying to be bipartisan.
Right.
And I think, I've always made the point that's actually what got Democrats to support the legislation in the end, because they tried, to go work with Republicans, refused, but also Republicans kind of by refusing put Democrats in a position where they had no choice but to support the final bill. And I think that's an important point. In a way, you're saying to, Democrats in some ways need to be convinced that they have to go this route. And the only way to do that is to go through the process of trying to get Republicans to get on board. And look, I think some of them may see some benefit to going back to voters in 2022 and saying, we did all of these great things and we tried to work Republicans and they wouldn't work with us and they wouldn't support this. And So they may think that it heightens the political, differences between the two parties. Again, I don't think it matters all that much, but I have enough. I have to be at least. Let me put it a different way. I have to respect the fact that Joe Biden is the president, that these people are all in political office. They've all won political office, and they may have a better feel for their voters, better feel for than I do. Now, I could be right. They could be wrong.
I appreciate you giving a couple different perspectives and interpretations, even though they're not fully yours. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. I just wonder how people get told a story, or what story they tell themselves about what's happening in politics and government with their representatives. How did this get done, as opposed to just seeing things happen, changing in their life? I feel like most people aren't actually paying that close attention to the narrative of how the sausage gets made and how bipartisan the thing is, and more like, am I getting a check? Do I have a job? Healthcare?
Yeah, I agree with you. And my sense of it is that voters don't care all that much. But I think I'm in the minority there when it comes to Congress.
I also want to ask you your thoughts. I haven't seen you, if you've written about this or tweeted about it, correct me, the whole E. Jean Carroll Department of Justice situation that now people probably know about. Merrick Garland basically defending the Trump Department of Justice on the whole defamation lawsuit. I'm not explaining it. People know what I'm talking about, but folks are going crazy. All my favorite legal analysts are going crazy about Merrick Garland, saying, see, I told you, he's an institutionalist. We don't need that right now. We need someone who's going to keep the last DOJ and folks who are running that institution accountable for their corruption and their crimes. What do you think of this? Have you written about it?
I have not, and I'll be honest with you. I haven't followed the issue that closely, but what I would just say about this, and I think this is just a point to keep in mind, is that as a general rule, presidents and presidential administrations tend to protect the prerogatives of the executive branch, and I think that's probably what's happening right here. Is that they think that protecting Trump on this issue is symbolically a way of saying that presidents are live in a rarefied legal era.
I know, but I want to think that Joe Biden and the Biden administration have said nothing, have nothing to do with this, and because that would insinuate they're influencing DOJ's choices, and that this is a Merrick Garland Department of Justice decision.
I mean, I'm guessing it is, but
all right. Well, let me ask you something that you have thought a lot about.
Sometimes I do know about it.
That's fine. I just wanted to throw that one at you real quick because there's been a lot of talk about that, which is in your Substack, you have an article written titled "Be Afraid, America, Be Very Afraid." It's becoming increasingly difficult to define the Republican Party as anything other than an authoritarian political party. And then in USA Today, you have a piece that they published about how Republicans are actually carrying this out by passing laws abridging, restricting First Amendment rights. And I want to tie both of those together, which I think should be easy for you to do. This is so important. When you start writing this stuff, I start paying even more attention.
Well, yeah, I mean, the piece I wrote for, I did a piece back in, I think it was in February, sort of making this argument that if you look at the way that, so there's a great book came out a couple of years ago called How Democracies Die. It was by two Harvard political scientists. And they argue that democracies don't die because of some, coup attempt or some kind of big conflagration of some sort. They die sort of slowly when the basic political norms get eroded and the rules that the democratic rules, democratic institutions become weakened. And they argue that's kind of what's been happening in the United States. And they have this chart looking at, warning signs that you're looking at a possible authoritarian leader. And when they wrote this, they were really referring to Donald Trump and his authoritarian tendencies. But I sort of took their chart and I looked at, okay, can this be applied to the Republican Party writ large? And some of the things that some of the warning signs are: rejection of democratic rules of the game, undermine legitimacy of elections, seeking extra constitutional means to change government, including violent insurrections. Do they deny the legitimacy of their political opponents? Do they tolerate or encourage violence? Do they attempt to curtail civil liberties of their opponents? And arguably, Republicans are doing all of those things. And you could focus on their tacit support for the insurrection, the refusal to investigate it, the fact that a majority of congressional Republicans voted not to certify the 2020 election. I looked at this, and what I focused on the USA Today piece was their effort to curtail political protest, which, as we know, or as most hopefully we know, is a First Amendment guaranteed right. The right to peacefully assemble and redress grievances. What's happening in red state America is that Republicans are passing legislation that basically is making it harder to to engage in political protest. They're defining riots as little as 2 or 3 people creating public alarm. They are in Florida, they're classifying a public gathering as a riot if there's 3 or more people, and anyone who participates, and if that riot turns into violence, people can be charged with a felony even if they weren't engaging in violence.
It's crazy.
It's crazy. In Oklahoma, they passed a law, and this in Florida also, that allows that if a driver runs over somebody blocking their way, a protester, if they don't intend to hurt the person, I'm not sure how you do that by running them over, how you don't intend to hurt them, but if they unintentionally injure, they are immune from civil or criminal liability. It's basically encouraging people to run over protesters.
Yeah. It's like the stand your ground law. It's not perfectly.
Oh no,
parallel,
that's a great analogy. If somebody feels they're in danger, they have somewhat of a, not carte blanche, but reasonably limited carte blanche to run that person over. So and the way that I interpret these laws is they're not really. I don't know if they're going to be prosecuted. I don't know if people can be arrested. What I do know is that they are intending to pass these laws to chill political protest, right? I mean, if I told you that you could go to a march in New York City, and you could protest Donald Trump or Mitch McConnell or Joe Biden if you want to, whoever, and if that event turns into a violent protest for whatever reason, you could be charged with a felony. Are you still going to want to participate?
Yeah, no, as I was reading your tweets and your piece at your Substack, which is so good. If people haven't subscribed, do it right now. truthandcons.substack.com. I always love.
Or you can just go truthandcons.com.
There you go. Truthandcons.com. I love getting your perspective on these things and then calling you and asking you for more details on it. But just, I'll let you go on this. But just, I feel like after reading this, I just kept thinking about, and I've been talking to all these experts for years now about authoritarianism and democracy dying. And I'm not familiar with that book that you just mentioned, but How Democracies Die by Daniel Ziblatt and Stephen Levitsky. I'll get one or both on. But I just keep thinking about Russia and how red state America is turning into and looking just like, and even copying the tactics of Russians. And it's so ironic because Republicans, for a generation or two, were terrified of the Russians and saw them as the greatest threat. And now we're copying them. They're copying them.
I would broaden it because I think it's not just Russians. It's basically all authoritarians. And here's the point that
I agree with you, but it seems so specific, like to current day Putin tactics. But I completely agree with you. And sorry.
I mean, the interesting analogy to me is a place like Hungary, which was after the fall of the Berlin Wall was a pretty vibrant democracy. And what's happened there in the last couple of years is that the right wing leader Viktor Orban has basically chipped away at democratic rights, democratic protections. And so what I see happening in red state America in particular is that these states are creating what are in effect one party rule. So you look at a state. You can look at things like Texas that is now limiting it, that has this voting restrictions bill. It hasn't passed yet. They're going to have a special session to try to pass it. It would basically make it harder for Democrats to vote. And let's be honest, this is a bill that is geared toward helping hurting Democrats, making it harder for them to vote. So on the one hand, they're saying their political rivals, we don't want you to vote. We want to make it harder for you to vote against us. Then you have this aggressive gerrymandering, which means in places like Wisconsin, for example, which is actually a blue state, Joe Biden won there, it is virtually impossible because of the way that the state has been gerrymandered on the state legislature level. It's basically impossible for Democrats to win control of the state legislature. I think last election they won a strong majority of votes, and still Republicans had 2/3 of the seats. And then you have this political protest. And so the third part of it is saying to political rivals, we want to make it harder for you to protest laws you don't like. And when you look at those three together, these are concerted efforts to isolate and to diminish the political power of Democrats, of Republicans' political rivals. That is a one-party state. And that's what you see happening in authoritarian countries all around the world.
I think the most important point here, though, of all of this, and I just want to get your take on this real quick, and then I promise I'll let you go, which is, I keep hearing this phrase, tyranny of the minority. And how do you explain that, how much power, and there's many different ways to explain it, how much power a minority of Americans who think in what I'll just say, a completely ignorant way about so many important things, from how government should work to science to religious. There's so much religion there, the Christian right. How do you explain the tyranny of the minority, from the Senate to what you're talking about with Wisconsin to even media? How would you articulate?
Well, I mean, I think that, when you look at, first of all, I'll say that in red state America, this is the tyranny of the majority, right? I mean, these are Republican states, and they are basically putting in rules to ensure they remain in the majority. As far as on a federal level,
would you say that about Wisconsin, though?
Well, Wisconsin, don't forget, they have a Democratic governor. They do have a Democratic, two Democratic senators. No, one Democratic senator, sorry. Biden did win there in 2020. But yes, on a state legislative level, yes, the tyranny of it's the minority has basically, it's a swing state, but they've created a situation in which Democrats can't win. So yes, that is an example of it. But on a federal level, what it really comes down to is it's just the way that our system is set up that gives, in the Senate particularly, a lot of clout to small states. And it just turns out that a lot of those small states are Republican states. So you have a situation in which Wyoming has less than 1 million citizens, and it has the same number of senators as California, which has about 40 million people who live there. Yeah. And, that if you look at the numbers, it's insane to see just how underrepresented, overrepresented, I should say, Republicans are in the U.S. Senate. If I could make one reform, if I had a magic wand to make one change to the U.S. government, it would be to get rid of the Senate. Just get rid of it altogether. It's an undemocratic body. Get rid of it. Just have it be the House and be a majority rule.
Never heard that proposal. Why
it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen, but it would be a really good idea. But I think it's
get rid of the flag too. Just come up with your own flag.
If you want, but I'll be happy with get rid of the Senate, frankly. But if you get to him down to it, it's the Senate allows, and then Republicans also know how to game the system, right? They figured out they stopped these voting rights bills from moving forward. They packed the courts with Republican leaning judges that enforce. You saw this in California last week. This judge who compared AR-15s to I think a Swiss Army knife, and banned ended the ban on assault weapons in California. This is the kind of thing. This is by the way, that's an example of legislating from the bench, which Republicans supposedly hate. But yeah, they figured out how to maintain their political rule. And what you're seeing in these red states is they're basically putting in place rules and laws that ensure they never lose power. That's what's happening.
Then they're just draconian. They're just crazy rules and laws that they're passing.
But there's no recourse because there's no voting rights. The Voting Rights Act has been basically gutted. Yeah. So you can't use the Voting Rights Act to undo these laws. And, the courts are, we'll see what happens when these things go through court battles, but, that could take years.
Do you have time for one more?
Yeah, go ahead. Really quick.
All right, here it is. I feel like you tell me if this is wrong and if this is like over dramatic. And Dr. Martin Luther King and John Lewis and millions of others worked so hard to pass civil rights, get legislation passed, and just focusing on the part about voting so that they would have no obstacles to vote, to end Jim Crow. They did it. It took forever. And so many people died. They did it. It was a dramatic win. And that was years ago, in the 60s? When was that? A little different
civil
legislation
passed. 65.
And John Roberts, the Supreme Court, undid it after it had been confirmed by Republicans for years and years. John Roberts, the Supreme Court, undid it. And now Democrats are trying to redo Dr. King's work in 2021. And a Democrat himself met with all the civil rights leaders or civil rights leaders from a whole bunch of groups And he's like, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. And Republicans aren't going to do it. Like what they did back in the 60s has been undone. In 2021, Democrats and most Americans want to redo it, and we can't. Am I being overdramatic, and is this framing inaccurate? You wrote the book, I think American Maelstrom.
It's a little in the sense that, the Civil Rights Act still remains in place, right? I think that, one thing that I will just point out that we've made extraordinary advances since the 1960s. I mean, Black Americans have made extraordinary advances. All Americans have for the most part. But what I think you're seeing now is less an effort to reverse what Dr. King and the civil rights leaders achieved, and more an effort to enshrine permanent Republican rule. Now that those two things overlap, but I'm going to make sort of maybe a little bit of a controversial statement here that a lot of this legislation on voting restrictions is ultimately it limits the franchise of Black voters, but the reason why Republicans do that is because Black voters vote Democratic. So it's sort of a chicken. Is it out of racial animus or political advantage? It's probably a little bit of both, but I'd argue it's probably more political advantage than anything else. This is really about, let's just call it's a power grab. Republicans, want to restrict voting rights, in places like Harris County in Texas, which is, a lot of African Americans, but a lot of white liberals also.
And in states, specifically in states, they're not trying to limit voting rights in red states. They're trying to limit voting rights in the few states and districts, as you said, that they need, right?
Right. I mean, they didn't try to do this right. They didn't try to do any kind of federal legislation when they had power. And I don't think it, for a variety of reasons, I think that a lot of them wouldn't have gone along.
Because there's not a problem. That's why.
Well, but that doesn't matter to them. Those make stuff up. But what's happened, like what happened in Texas, happened in Georgia, and happened in Arizona. This is all about, and even to some extent other states, this is all about just ensuring Republicans stay in power. Look, in Iowa and Montana, they passed restrictive voting rules. There are very few, Black people of color in those states, but this is really about limiting the rights, limiting the ability to vote of Democratic constituencies. Now, I granted this could have a backlash effect. I mean, this could actually end up hurting Republicans in some of these states. I mean, you limit voting rights places like Montana, you end up hurting Republicans as well as Democrats. But I think understand this, so the motivation for this is primarily about maintaining Republican political power. And they can't win by the strength of their ideas because they don't really have any ideas. They didn't have a platform in 2020. They win by gaming the system. Or they're trying to win by gaming the system. And I think that's what you're seeing happening here. So, it's a lot. I'm not trying to dismiss the racial element of this because it's important. But this is really about maintaining political power. That's what this is about. And they are willing to basically abrogate the basic rules of our democracy in order to achieve that goal. It's disgusting and it's gross, but let's understand what's driving it. It's all about political keeping their jobs. To put it more in simple terms. Well, it's all about keeping their jobs, basically.
And racism that animates it all.
I mean, look, racism has unfortunately been a key element of Republican politics for 50 years, since 68. There's no question about that. I'm not in any way trying to play that down.
I know. I just wanted to
but I think it's not just a question about of racism.
Truthandcons.com. Truthandcons.com.
Truthandcons.com.
Everybody. Always great to talk with you. Go subscribe right now.
You know what I should do? I should send you a link that would give all of your listeners a 20% discount if they join. Let me see if I can work that out.
If you can work that out, I'll include it. If you can't work it out this time, then next time, no pressure. But I will absolutely include that, and they'll love it.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Just as I do. Thank you very much for joining me on short notice. I really appreciate it.
It was as always a great pleasure.
Yeah, there you go. Michael Cohen, always a pleasure to have him on. And he gave us a special link and discount to his newsletter. You can link to that through the show notes of today's podcast, especially for stand-up listeners. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Maura, Quint, for listening, for joining me, as well as for you for listening. See, my brain's getting ahead of me, and I really appreciate it. Of course, if you are a paid subscriber, it's great to hang out with you guys last night. And I appreciate you whenever I hear from you. So email me, standupwithpete@gmail.com. Hang out with us on the Discord platform if you're a member of the community. We'd love to hear from you. You're never alone because you can always just fire up Discord and chat and text, and it's a lot of fun. So thank you for being a part of the community. Thank you for listening, and I will talk to you tomorrow here on Stand Up. Christian Finnegan, and take it away, John Carroll.
They knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right, we got to speak up, we got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and it'll tell you not to run and